Ron Paul!
All right. David also ran for Congress in the 5th Congressional District here in Illinois in 2010. And he's just been a tireless advocate of the freedom movement. So let's hear it for David Radowitz.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. My name is David Radowitz, and I'd like to thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. And I'd like to thank our organizers. This is probably one of the best days ever to have an End the Fed rally, because first of all, the weather's pretty good for Chicago this time of year. And not only that, but this has been a pretty momentous week in the world of the Federal Reserve. Think about how this week started off. We had a deal to end the so-called debt ceiling crisis, and then we found out that employment numbers were better than expected, corporate earnings better than expected, and what happened? The stock market tanked. One of the most precipitous drops in the stock market in history. And just imagine that. When corporate earnings are good, right? Aren't investors of the world people? And think about the investors of the world. Think about what the stock market is. It's basically three people analyzing information and freely making decisions on how to best use their money, their assets. Well, don't you think that they want to get in on better than expected corporate profits? Unless, of course, they realize that corporate profits are basically an accounting scam. Unless they realize that, if corporations were paying interest rates based on actual supply and demand, there'd be no profits. If those earnings, corporate earnings being reported, weren't being reported in money that was inflated and so worth less than when they originally invested it, then there'd be no real corporate earnings. And that's why you're starting to see the market, which is the decentralized intelligence, instead of some bureaucrat crafting interest rates, or the mainstream media telling us what to think. It's people making independent decisions based on what they should do with their own money. And people making such decisions apparently aren't buying the story that we're being given. Throat's a bit dry on the top. After almost a century of this weird experiment in central planning of currency, we're starting to see the company line, the corporate government line. It's coming to the end of its credibility. People just aren't believing it anymore. For years and years, those of us questioning the validity of the Federal Reserve, we always had to give people reasons why the Federal Reserve is bad. But think about this, and I want you guys to try this in the next couple of weeks. When you're having discussions with people, as I'm too often do, people who are skeptical of it, ask them to explain why we should have a Federal Reserve. Because it's not doing a good job of managing the money supply. It's not protecting the value of our currency. Now, we in this group all know the value of the U.S. dollar has eroded 96% since the creation of the Federal Reserve. We don't know that. Most people don't realize it. But that's kind of an esoteric thing to describe. I mean, who was around in 1913? You know what I mean? People have trouble conceptualizing what a dollar could have bought a century ago. But they can see something as plain as, a week ago everyone was telling us that if corporate earnings weren't good and employment didn't improve and we didn't have a deal for this debt ceiling thing, that the markets would tank. Well, we got everything that was supposed to be done, and the market still tanked. Somehow, people making free and independent decisions just don't feel like the way we're doing things is working. So I think it's high time. I think that the time for this movement has come. And it's time for us to keep pressing this issue. And it's about time. Now, we all know we have a champion in the upcoming presidential election. I want to make sure you guys all get behind him. That's right. Know who he is. But for decades, as Tim said, I cast my first ever vote in 1988 for Ron Paul. And most of my peers didn't know who he was. Nobody questioned him back then. They just hadn't heard of him. But 4 years ago, people were questioning him. But think about how effective he's been in pushing pushing the whole debate. You know, I watched one of these Republican primary debates, and if you look at a guy like, say, a Mitt Romney, he sounds a lot closer to Ron Paul of 2008 than he sounds to Mitt Romney of 2008. We've been pushing the entire debate of this entire country. You know, I'm sure you guys are all familiar with Elliot Spencer, right? You know, he's written this book, which apparently is an atrocious book, but it's aimed at debunking libertarianism. Now, we don't have to get into it. You can imagine Elliot Spencer's misunderstanding of the term. But the point is the powers that be have us in their sights. They understand that what we're saying is finally getting listened to. And now is the time to be raising your voices, to be spreading the message. Because we now live in America. You know, Nicholas Gillespie just published a book about this. We're now living in the libertarian moment in American history. We have an entire generation, and maybe I'm old fogey to some people, but I think a lot of people are among this generation, which has grown up essentially in a libertarian view of things. You know, you're expecting to be able to get what you want without having to take somebody else's view. You're expected to be able to say, you know, I oppose wars, but that doesn't mean I'm for a government takeover of the healthcare industry. Or, you know, you're willing to say, I believe in economic freedom, but that doesn't mean I'm going to pay some bureaucrat to come snooping in my bedroom. We now live in a world where we can advocate for exactly what we believe in. And it's high time we do that. It's our time to get that message out there. And I want to thank you guys all for being here. And I want to encourage you to stay active, because our time is coming. Thank you very much. I'm David.